you are not as alone as you think. Right now, inside your gut, there are approximately 100 trillion microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses, representing somewhere between 500 and 1,000 different species. They outnumber your own cells. They collectively contain 150 times more genes than your own genome. They've been with you in one form or another since the moment you were born, and they are running processes that your own cells cannot manage without them. They digest fiber you can't digest. They produce vitamins your body can't synthesize. They train your immune system to distinguish friend from foe. They communicate directly with your brain through a highway of nerve fibers that runs from your gut all the way to your brainstem. We've known about bacteria for about 150 years. We've understood the full complexity of the human microbiome for less than 20. What we've discovered in those 2 decades has fundamentally changed how we think about human health and about what we eat to maintain it. Today, probiotics, what they are, where they come from, and what your gut bacteria are really doing down there, and how to support them intelligently without spending $80 on a supplement that a bowl of yogurt could replace. This is Eat or Die, Stories from the Human Table, from Renegade Health Group. I'm Zach Sykes. Each week, we take one food, molecule, or nutrient and follow it through history, through science, and through your daily life. 10 episodes in, this one is shorter, deliberately. We have a 4-part dairy series coming, and probiotics is the bridge that connects fish and fermentation to everything dairy will explore. Consider this the intellectual setup, the practical foundation, a smaller episode that earns its place by being precise. Let's go. A probiotic is a live microorganism that, when consumed in adequate amounts, confers a health benefit on the host. That's the World Health Organization definition, and it's precise enough to be useful. Keywords: live, adequate amounts, health benefit. All 3 conditions must be met, which is why most of the probiotic supplement market fails by missing at least one of them. You will also hear of prebiotics. Prebiotics are what probiotics eat: dietary fibers and compounds that the human gut cannot digest, but that specific gut bacteria ferment for fuel. Prebiotics feed the microbiome. Probiotics add to it. Both matter, and the distinction is worth keeping clear. The human microbiome, the full community of microorganisms living in and on your body, is dominated by the gut, which hosts the vast majority of that 100 trillion figure. The composition of your gut microbiome is established first by how you were born. Traditional delivery transfers a different microbial community than C-section birth. Then shaped by whether you were breastfed, whether you grew up, what antibiotics you've taken, what you eat, and a range of genetic and environmental factors still being mapped by researchers. In our diet, these probiotic bacteria come from fermented foods. Any food where live bacteria or yeast transform the original substrate through controlled fermentation. Yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, tempeh, kombucha, these are not just health food trends. They are among the oldest food preservation technologies humans ever developed. And the bacteria doing the preserving are the same bacteria that happen to benefit your gut. Humans have been fermenting food for at least 10,000 years, likely longer. Every culture that has ever existed has developed fermented foods independently, driven by the same practical need: preservation. Before refrigeration, fermentation was the technology. The lactic acid produced by fermenting bacteria lowers the pH of food enough to inhibit the growth of pathogens. Fermented food was safer food. It lasted longer, and it happened to contain billions of live bacteria that, when consumed, colonized the gut of the person eating it. The specifics varied by culture and climate. In Korea, it was kimchi, vegetables fermented with lactobacillus bacteria into a spiced, preserved condiment that remains a cornerstone of Korean cuisine. In Eastern Europe, it was kefir, a fermented milk drink with a complex microbial community of both bacteria and yeast. In Japan, it was miso and natto, fermented soybean products with distinct flavor profiles and distinct microbial populations. In Central Asia, it was kumis, fermented mare's milk. In Germany, sauerkraut. In the Middle East, laban and labne, and in India, lassi and dahi. Every culture, every climate, every food tradition. Fermentation is omnipresent, everywhere, always. The bacteria were not an accident. They were the point. The scientific study of probiotics begins with a Russian zoologist named Ilya Mechnikov, working at the Pasteur Institute in Paris in the early 20th century. Already having won the Nobel Prize in 1908 for his discovery of phagocytosis, the process by which immune cells engulf and destroy pathogens, Mechnikov became fascinated by longevity, specifically by reports of unusually long-lived populations in rural Bulgaria and the Caucasus Mountains, where centenarians, people living to over 100, were disproportionately common. His investigation led him to a common factor. These populations consumed large quantities of fermented dairy, yogurt and kefir primarily, on a daily basis. Mechnikov proposed that the lactobacillus bacteria in these fermented foods suppressed the growth of putrefactive gut bacteria that he believed were producing toxins and accelerating aging. He began eating sour milk daily and advocated for fermented dairy as a path to extended healthy life. Mechnikov was partially right and partially wrong in the specific mechanism, but the core observation was sound. The populations eating the most fermented food lived the longest. He named the beneficial bacteria and proposed the framework that would eventually become probiotic science. He died in 1916 at the age of 71. Not quite the longevity he'd hoped for, but he spent his last years eating a great deal of yogurt and writing about it, which is not the worst way to go. The term probiotic itself, meaning for life from Latin and Greek, was coined in 1953 and refined through subsequent decades as the science of gut bacteria developed. The real acceleration came with the development of genomic sequencing technology in the 1990s and 2000s, which allowed researchers to identify and characterize the full complexity of the gut microbiome for the first time. Before genomic sequencing, we could only study bacteria we could culture in a lab, and most gut bacteria can't be cultured. Sequencing revealed a world we had barely glimpsed. The Human Microbiome Project, launched by the NIH in 2007, was the gut equivalent of the Human Genome Project, a systematic effort to map the full microbial community of the human body. What it has found has generated thousands of research papers and fundamentally reshaped multiple fields of medicine. We are still digesting what we've learned. The professor is in, and with trillions of organisms, there is plenty to talk about. We're going to keep it tight. Two mechanisms, but lean in because the science is dense. Your gut bacteria are not passive residents. They are metabolically active, producing compounds that your own cells cannot make and regulating processes your own genome does not directly control. The most important of those compounds are your short chain fatty acids, produced when gut bacteria ferment dietary fiber. The primary short chain fatty acids are butyrate, propionate, and acetate. Butyrate is the headline. It is the primary fuel source for the cells lining your colon, which are called colonocytes, providing approximately 70% of their energy. Without adequate butyrate, the colonocytes struggle, and the intestinal lining, which is the barrier between your gut contents and the rest of your body, begins to degrade. That barrier matters enormously. A healthy intestinal barrier is selectively permeable. It allows nutrients through while keeping pathogens and undigested food particles and bacterial byproducts out of the bloodstream. When the barrier degrades, a condition called intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut, those things get through. The immune system, encountering bacterial fragments and undigested proteins in the bloodstream, mounts an inflammatory response. Chronic systemic low-grade inflammation, the same upstream driver we've discussed in the context of sugar, refined grains, and omega-6 excess, it's partly a leaky gut story. Now, butyrate-producing bacteria are among the most beneficial members of a healthy gut microbiome. They require dietary fiber to do their job. Feed them fiber from vegetables, legumes, whole grains, resistant starch, and they will produce butyrate. Starve them of fiber, as the modern processed food diet does, and their populations decline. The butyrate declines with them, and the intestinal barrier weakens. Beyond butyrate, gut bacteria synthesize vitamin K2, the same compound we discussed in the vitamin D episode as the essential cofactor for calcium direction into bone, as well as B vitamins, including folate and B12, in impactful quantities. They regulate the immune system's development and calibration. Approximately 70% of the body's immune tissue is located in and around the gut, and the microbial community present from birth is one of the primary teachers of that immune tissue, training it to tolerate harmless substances while mounting appropriate responses to genuine threats. Now for the mechanism that tends to stop people mid-thought. Your gut has its own nervous system. The enteric nervous system, sometimes called the second brain, contains approximately 500 million neurons embedded in the lining of the gastrointestinal tract. That's more neurons than the spinal cord. Your gut can sense, process, and respond to its environment largely independently of the brain in your skull. The communication between gut and brain runs primarily through the vagus nerve. You've heard of that. The longest cranial nerve in the body, running from the brainstem down through the chest and into the abdomen. Critically, approximately 80 to 90% of the vagus nerve's fibers are afferent, meaning they carry signals from the gut to the brain, not the other way around. Your gut is talking to your brain far more than your brain is talking to your gut. So what does the gut say? It says, in part, whatever the bacteria living in it want it to say. Gut bacteria influence the production and signaling of neurotransmitters. Most strikingly, approximately 90 to 95% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, not the brain. Serotonin is not just a mood molecule. In the gut, it regulates motility, secretion, and the signals sent up the vagus nerve. But the gut-brain serotonin connection is real, bidirectional, and still being mapped. Animal studies have demonstrated that germ-free mice, raised without any gut bacteria, show dramatically altered anxiety and stress responses compared to mice with normal microbiomes. Transplanting gut bacteria from anxious mice into previously calm germ-free mice transfers anxiety-like behaviors. These are animal studies, of course, but the translation to humans is not quite direct. But the direction of effect is consistent with human observational data linking microbiome diversity to mood outcomes, and with the emerging clinical literature on probiotic supplementation in depression and anxiety scores. This is new science. It's not settled science, but it is sufficiently compelling that dismissing it is no longer intellectually defensible. The bacteria in your gut are, in ways we are still mapping, participants in your mental life. So here is the practical guide, what you've been waiting for. Before supplements, always food. The research consistently shows that fermented food delivers probiotic bacteria in a more bioavailable, more diverse, and more food matrix supported form than most supplements. A 2021 Stanford study published in Cell found that a high fermented food diet increased microbiome diversity and reduced markers of inflammation, effects that a high fiber diet alone did not produce as quickly. Eat the fermented food. So tier 1, eat daily. Kefir is the single most probiotic dense commonly available fermented food, containing up to 61 distinct microbial strains in some analyses, including both bacteria and yeast. It is more diverse and more populated than most commercial yogurts. Plain, full-fat kefir, not the sweetened, fruit-flavored versions which have sugar loads that work against the microbiome, is the benchmark. 1 cup per day is a high-level intervention. Plain yogurt with live active cultures, specifically labeled as containing live and active cultures, not heat-treated after fermentation, which kills it, is the accessible everyday option. Full-fat Greek yogurt from quality producers is the practical standard. Check the label for live cultures. If it doesn't say it, assume it doesn't have them. Now our second tier. Eat these several times per week. Kimchi. Lacto-fermented vegetables, traditionally Napa cabbage with chili, garlic, and ginger, is one of the most studied fermented foods in the literature, with consistent associations with improved gut microbiome diversity, reduced inflammation, and metabolic benefits. It is also, for those who enjoy it, one of the most flavorful condiments available. Eat it as a side dish, on eggs, in grain bowls, however it fits. Sauerkraut, fermented cabbage, is the Western equivalent. Lower in variety, but rich in lactobacillus strains and accessible everywhere. The critical caveat: it must be raw. Refrigerated sauerkraut, not the shelf-stable canned or jarred versions, which are pasteurized and contain no live bacteria. Find it in the refrigerated section. And miso, fermented soybean paste. It adds probiotic benefit and extraordinary umami depth to soups, dressings, and marinades. Add it after cooking rather than boiling it. High heat kills bacteria. And then there's tier 3. In the probiotic world, these are still useful additions. Kombucha, fermented tea. It is lower in probiotic density than kefir or kimchi, but it does contain beneficial acids and some live cultures. Watch the sugar content, though, of commercial kombucha, which varies enormously. Tempeh, fermented soybeans, pressed into a firm cake, is an excellent protein source with a little probiotic benefit, particularly useful for plant-based eaters. Now, If you are recovering from antibiotic treatment, managing a specific GI condition, or simply not eating fermented foods regularly, a probiotic supplement can be useful. Here is how to navigate a market full of products that don't deliver what they promise. CFU count, or colony forming unit count, is the number on the label most people look at, but it is not the most important factor. A product with 50 billion CFU of a strain with no clinical evidence of benefit is less useful than one with a fraction of those CFU, but of a well-studied strain. Strain specificity matters more than quantity. Speaking of strains, I'm about to go over a few of the most useful ones. Their names can be challenging to reconcile between the pronunciation and the spelling, so I'll post this episode's script on Patreon for anyone who wants to read this next bit as well. For general gut health and microbiome diversity, Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium longum are the most broadly studied strains with the widest evidence base. Look for products containing both, with at least 10 billion CFU per dose, for manufacturers with third-party testing. For antibiotic-associated diarrhea and gut recovery post-antibiotics, Saccharomyces boulardii, technically a yeast rather than a bacterium, has the strongest evidence base for this specific use case. It is resistant to antibiotics, since it's not a bacterium. Antibiotics don't touch it, and actively reduces the incidence of antibiotic-associated diarrhea. Take it during and for 2 weeks after antibiotic treatment. For IBS and digestive discomfort, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG and Bifidobacterium infantis 35624 have the most consistent evidence for IBS symptom reduction in clinical trials. Strain designation does matter here. The GG and the 35624 are specific strains with specific evidence, not interchangeable with other products with the same kind. The rule: identify your goal, find the strain with evidence for that goal, verify third-party testing for viability, and take it with or just before a meal. Stomach acid kills bacteria, and food buffers that acid. Timing does matter. You are a habitat. The 100 trillion organisms living in your gut are not freeloaders. They are partners, metabolic, immunological, neurological partners in the business of keeping you alive and functional. They evolved alongside us, they shape our immune systems, they're talking to our brains, and they thrive or struggle based primarily on what we feed them. Feed them fiber. Feed them fermented food. Stop killing them with unnecessary antibiotics and ultra-processed diets that provide nothing for them to work with. You have never eaten alone. You never will. Eat accordingly. Well, that's episode 10 of Eat or Die Stories from the Human Table. I'm Zach Sykes, Renegade Health Group. Go eat some kimchi, or kefir, or a bowl of plain yogurt with live cultures. Do something kind for the 100 trillion organisms who are right now doing something kind for you. Share this episode. Find us on Facebook or Instagram at Renegade Health Group and leave a review. We read every one. Next episode, we begin something ambitious. A 4-part series on dairy, one of the most culturally loaded, nutritionally debated, and historically significant food categories in human history. We start at the beginning. Milk. What it is, the extraordinary story of how humans became the only adult mammals on Earth to drink the milk of other species, and what the science actually says about whether that was a good idea. It's going to be a rich series. We'll see you there. Until then, eat well. And remember, The bacteria are rooting for you.